AI at work? Who are the users in my business that would benefit from Copilot for Microsoft 365? And then the culture shift. This is a technology that they won't have used before. They might have engaged with ChatGPT, but you engage in different ways. So how do we make sure that if we're investing money in Copilot for Microsoft 365, we're gaining the output within the timeframes that we want fairly quickly? We get a speed to value. So security. Let's start off with security. Now, Copilot for Microsoft 365 respects the principles of the organization. It's built on our comprehensive approach to security for SMBs and enterprise, but it understands security, compliance, and privacy principles already in place in the business. I'm going to elaborate on that in a moment. But responsible AI is also built into the solution. There are guardrails put in place. People can't ask for Copilot's help to try and cook up a conspiracy theory, but also how you engage in the applications. In the use case I'll show later on, you'll see that when you engage in Outlook, it opens up a small sandbox in which you engage with Copilot. And before being able to send an email, you have to approve that, yeah, I want to keep what it is that Copilot's generated for me, or I want to bin it off, I want to amend it. But you have to engage with that information. It's not automation. Copilot is your AI assistant. It's your Copilot, not autopilot, to help you get to the outcome faster. But let's talk a little bit more deeper about security and what I mean by respecting the principles. Now, there might be some technical on the call, there might not be some technical on the call. I am not technical in nature, so hopefully I'm not going to go into too much technical. But when I talk about Copilot being able to understand and respect the principles that already exist, let's say you have SharePoints in your business, and half of your business have got access to a specific SharePoint and the rest of them don't. For the individuals that have access to that SharePoint, if they were asking Copilot a question about information that's hosted in a document in that SharePoint, Copilot will return a response, because it will check the permissions on that SharePoint, it will check the controls in place, and it will only provide a response to the individuals that have access to view that information. In the circumstance you don't have access, Copilot won't even confirm that the information exists and you just don't have access. It will say something along the lines of, I'm sorry, I couldn't find anything relating to that. Now, in some circumstances, you've got your SharePoint controls in place. Somebody takes a file out of that location. They want to share it with John. John has access to another SharePoint, so they move it to another location. But that SharePoint is openly available for the business. Now, if Copilot's given access to that SharePoint, because you can restrict SharePoint access in Copilot, what it will start to do is it will start to make that information in the document available for everybody, unless information protection at the document level is activated. And then again, what you have is a defined list of individuals that are privy to that information. You'll have seen it at the top of a Word or a PowerPoint document where it has a classifier where it says highly confidential or general. Copilot understands and checks the principles in place before returning an answer back to the individual. So whether it's SharePoint controls or whether it's information protection at the document level, Copilot understands this and respects this. This is one of the things that we talk about with customers and partners typically, about making sure that you're ready for Copilot. We are introducing new capabilities in April where you can restrict enterprise-wide search, business-wide search. So that actually in that circumstance, you can say to Copilot, don't want you to look at these SharePoints, I only want you to look at these 2 SharePoints. We're happy with the information in there. We're going to go on a data governance journey to make sure that we're happy with the rest of them. And in that circumstance, Copilot will only index the SharePoints you give it access to. At the moment, it's a reverse of that. You tell Copilot which ones you don't want it to access. But the new feature that's coming in is called restricted SharePoint search. But that, as I say, is due to come in April. The other thing to think about here as well is, if we think about data governance, it's also data retention. What data exists within your organization? Because if you give Copilot access to it, it can reason over that information and provide answers back. Do you have policies that are out of date that really don't need to be retained in those SharePoints, that would then give conflicting or confusing information back to an employee should they ask Copilot for an answer to a question? It's not only data governance, but also data retention is important to consider. And customer data protection is also ensured in this circumstance. Your data is your data. We do not use organizational data to train the large language models. The large language models have already been trained, and we will input new large language models as new iterations come to life, such as Turbo, GPT Turbo. But the information within your business is not used to train the large language model. And data processing and residency abides with the same agreements that already exist in your Microsoft 365 agreement. So if you're a UK customer, your calls to a large language model, that exclusive instance that I talked about, will be aimed at a UK data center hosted large language model. So there's some important considerations to make around security and compliance. But as I say, there are controls that you can put in place to make sure that Copilot's only reasoning over the information that you want it to, if you need to go on a data governance journey.